Hello, everyone, and welcome to the League One Lowdown podcast. Myself, Jamie Johnson, alongside Seb Jones, very early on a Monday morning, reviewing the game yesterday, the playoff final between Charlton Athletic and Leyton Orient. Seb, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, very good. Went to see Paul Heaton last night, so a little bit worse for wear this morning, but all is good. Other than that, how about you, Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, so we both watched the game, and then you went out watching Pullet, and I stayed in and did some unpacking and moving house today. So that's been sort of the other two sides of the spectrum. But you was over at Bramall Lane, around a load of unhappy Sheffield United fans for that Paul Heaton gig, and it's a good job we not got Sam with us this morning, because I'm sure Sam is one of the many unhappy Leyton Orient fans after their defeat yesterday. It finished 1-0, and we'll dissect, I beg your pardon, the game before we go into the other bits and pieces in this sort of mini review episode. As I say, just the one goal, and it was Macaulay Gillespie with it, first half free kick. Before I guess we go into the details of the game, the goal itself, the one turning point in the game, and the way I look at it, I think it's hard to have a go at the keeper too much, because he's had a great season. He did really well, of course, in the semi-final against Stockport, saving the shootout, Josh Keeley, and he made a couple of saves later on, but he's got to be saving this free kick, hasn't he?
Yeah. Well, at first I thought you were about to support the keeper then, and we all know Keely's capabilities, but you're right. Once you take first time I watched it, when I watched it live, you think, oh, what a great finish, But then when you see the replays, and then when you watch it again, you think, actually, the keeper's not that far off it. So the keeper could have actually got a solid hand to it, and prevented that. It wasn't, no, it was right in the corner. He's actually sort of within pretty savable distance from my point of view. And, I'm not an expert in terms of goalkeeping by any stretch, but I thought he could have done better. Yeah, despite the grit he's had, I thought he could have done better with that goal. As I mentioned, but not right in the corner. Yes, he would have had to go down. Well, he did get down low, but I thought it was well reachable in terms of preventing the goal going into the back of the net. So they'll be disappointed, I think, later on with that one. You can't blame him, because his season's been exceptional, but I guess it's just that one moment, isn't it, where you think what could have been really in terms of Josh Keeley, perhaps just stepping up in the big moments.
I guess it says fine margins, isn't it? I mean, and if this isn't the only goal in the game, then you don't end up talking about it too much, because
Yeah, exactly.
it's not the most egregious goalkeeping mistake ever. But he sort of left himself a little bit too much to do. He's quite far over to the other side, and he's got a lot of ground to make up, and he gets a hand to the ball, which is what pushes it into the side net and into the corner. And perhaps that sort of lays blame, and they needed another man in that wall. It was a 4-man wall, I think, and it probably could have done with being 5, because the ball where the ball went would have been where that fifth person was, and it would have been forced the free kick to come a bit wider, which would have made it closer to Keeley. So I think perhaps that is the problem, rather than the actual save itself, that they're just a setup of it. Probably missing a man in the wall. His positioning wasn't great. He was really far over the other side. And all that together, and it's those small margins, like I mentioned a minute ago, in a playoff final like this. And I mean, Gillespie's not going to mind too much. He sort of takes the headlines in terms of the goal he scored. Not the best free kick. They talked to him on the pitch after the game, and he said it's not the best free kick I've ever taken, but probably it's going to be the one that matters the most, isn't it, in terms of getting them into the Championship. And the game itself, that goal came in the 31st minute, and then after that, I mean, for the rest of the first half, Charlton carried on sort of the similar vein of sort of being on the front foot and being the better team, for me anyway, in the first half. I've seen quite a few people a bit dismissive of the way Charlton played, but they played in the style they can, and they can suffocate teams and really smother them. And that's what they did in the second half, because after they've took that lead, they're very happy to sit back. I think a mid-block would be generous. It was mostly a low block for the majority of the game. And in the second half especially, it meant Leyton Orient had more XG, a lot more shots, 16-5. On target, though, they had just the one, and that would be your concern, really. 16 shots, just the one on target. Kelman hit the bar as well, probably the closest they went in earnest. And Charlton, they just managed to stop the majority of those chances. And in the second half, Leyton Orient really struggled to have that one killer chance. a lot of balls in the final third just being overhit, underhit, not beating the first man, whatever it may be. It's just those tiny little mistakes and little bits and pieces that one instance goes right and it's probably 1-1, but it just never happened in that second half.
Yeah, exactly that. Like, as you mentioned there, 16 shots with just one on target. They were thoroughly disappointed, and Leyton Orient had the better chances. Not in terms of numerical, but in terms of numerical and in terms of physical chances. They got in some good positions. They got in some good areas to grab that equalising goal that then they could have used as a bit of momentum going forward, but they just couldn't finish, really. It's the bottom line of it. Having all these chances, having all these opportunities, that just the final ball and the final shot just wasn't there for Leyton Orient at all. And that is really disappointing, especially in the biggest game of the season at Wembley with a championship place at stake. That'll be the biggest disappointment, I think, for the Leyton Orient fans and for Richie Wellens as well. We've seen so often that they can score. That we've spoken so many times about their attacking options and the goal threats that they have. They can do it. They just weren't able to do it on the biggest stage. And some teams are just like that. And it's a shame, really, because a season is defined by one game, and over the course of the season, we know that Leyton Orient can score and they can get in good opportunities, and that final pass or final shot, it has been there. It's just a case in the game that it mattered, it wasn't there, and that will really disappoint Rich Wellens, I think. Especially that 16 shots, one on target. Hit the bar a couple of times as well. Yeah, they'll be really disappointed because and stats in general, they dominated as well, Leyton Orient, and Charlton, as you said, just sat back, allowed Leyton Orient the space, allowed Leyton Orient the opportunities to come at there a little bit, but Leyton Orient didn't make the most of that, and that'll be really disappointing for them, I think.
It's sort of the old snooker cliche. When they go to sort of a final frame decider and it's sort of 9-9, first to 10, they always say, no matter who it is, the commentator would always say, you just want a chance. And that's sort of the same thing I feel like in these sort of games where all you want is a good chance and you hope you're going to put it in the back of the net. And after a season's work, you really hope you're going to put it in the back of the net. And that just sort of never came really for Leyton Orient. As I say earlier, that real killer chance. And you mentioned sort of their dominance. The game overall, it was 62% possession to 38 in Leyton Orient's favour. The better XG, we mentioned more shots. In terms of passes, they had over double the amount of Charlton's, 151 for them and 319 for Leyton Orient. And it becomes even more stark in the second half with 71% possession to 29. And that paints that real picture of how that second half played out, of Charlton being willing to sit back. And I know a lot of people, I guess, don't like that and don't respect Nathan Jones for that sort of style. He's willing to put his team out to play and sort of sit back, absorb all the pressure. But it worked, and they're good enough to do that. You have to be a really good team defensively to sit back against the Leyton Orient, who have scored goals quite freely at times this season. Be willing to sit back and absorb all that pressure. Know they're going to really bombard you, but be willing to sit and take it. And I think that takes a lot of credit, and they've done really well in terms of being able to play that football and stay strong through that second half for me. And for me anyway, I feel you could be on a bit of an island with that sort of thing.
No, I agree, really. I agree. You're right in terms of it takes a certain type of side, especially, I mentioned about the big stage at Wembley, on the Wembley turf, to just sit back and just sort of play the game, really. Allow the opposition to come onto you without having that many chances, really, from a Charlton point of view. Allow Leyton Orient onto you, and yeah, Nathan Jones is, and I'm sure we'll come on to him in a couple of moments, but he is clearly had some sort of game plan, and his players have stuck to it really well. In terms of getting that goal, in the first half, and then just sitting back, because he knows, Nathan Jones and the Charlton players and the Charlton fans know how dangerous Leyton Orient can be, especially on the counter attack, especially with the attacking options that Leyton Orient have at their disposal. You never want to leave yourself too vulnerable at the back, but also sitting back is a bit of a risky game to play, because yes, the team's coming at you, but you have to have the quality in the side to be able to do that and to sort of manage, when to sit, when to press, when to sort of go in that mid block. It's a bit of a tricky game, a tricky balance to strike, really. And Charlton managed to balance it superbly, really, from coaching from Nathan Jones, from the players sort of on the pitch as well. Nathan Jones can do so much from the sidelines, from training. It's all about how it's executed on the pitch, and it was executed perfectly by Charlton Athletic. They did a really good job of sort of just holding the line. Yes, inviting Leyton Orient on to give attacking opportunities, but actually, they held them really well, Charlton, and they didn't really look in danger that much time. They didn't really look in that much danger, despite all the chances Leyton Orient had. They always looked in cruise control from my point of view, anyway.
Yeah, I think that's fair to us. And I mean, Sam was at the game, obviously. One of our co-hosts, Leyton Orient fan, and he said probably sending it to extra time would have been fair. And on the balance of chances, and you look at XG and that sort of thing, that's probably correct. But in terms of that killer quality, that was the difference between the two sides. There was never, I mean, I've said it a couple of times, but it's the real key for me, I think, the game, that there wasn't that big, real obvious chance. Charlton had a couple on the counter-attack in the second half as well. It wasn't like they were all part of the bus in that second half. They had a couple of chances on the counter. And it made for a decent enough game. I don't think many people were expecting a classic, and it wasn't as good as the game the day before with Sheffield United and Sunderland, all that late drama there. But it was still a decent game. There's a bit of communication issues late on. There was an 8-9 minute delay with the referees' microphones going down, and that didn't help matters, I don't think, because it made the game really stopped, and then we had 15 minutes left after that, which I don't think helped the momentum and flow towards the end of the game, especially for Leyton Orient, who were really pushing at that time. But you mentioned Nathan Jones a couple of times. We'll come on to him now, and it's a bit of indication, isn't it? You have to say. I mean, I think the commentary made a good deal about Nathan Jones, and obviously, I guess for the non-League One fan, the neutral, he's the big name of the whole occasion, isn't it? Because former Premier League manager, and he's got that bravado around him, hasn't he? He's a real big character. We spoke about him, myself and Callum, in the playoff semi-final in terms of his celebrations at the end of the game. But he's proved himself, hasn't he? Now with this victory, he's done what he set out to do in terms of getting Charlton out of the division.
He has, yeah, and I guess eyebrows were perhaps raised when he went to Charlton. Having had a good spell at Luton in the Championship and then the Premier League, and then a bit of a flop with Premier League with Southampton as well, and sort of to come down to League One, I guess a place he has been before, but not in recent years. I think eyebrows were raised, and progress was being made slowly. But at the start of this season, I think that they started off as a real sort of underdog, and they've gone throughout the season just ticking along, really, just picking up some really solid results, going under the radar a little bit because of the noise that perhaps Birmingham and Wrexham got, because of the noise that Stockport got, because they were doing really well, surprisingly really well as well. They had sort of slipped under the radar a little bit, and then I think they ended up finishing fourth in the final sort of league rankings. And Nathan Jones has done a really good job. He has obviously been about a little while. He's obviously an experienced manager, and Charlton, I guess, will be. I don't really know what the term is, but glad that it's paid off. Basically, in terms of bringing a manager of his style, his personality that you mentioned. Is not always a fan's favourite in terms of the way he acts. Some of his interviews are quite interesting to watch, and he doesn't always say the best of things really, and the most positive. He says it how it is. Some fans like that, some people don't. He gets very sort of ingrained in it all, very animated on the sidelines as well. Some fans just don't like that. But actually, clearly, there's been a really good bond between Nathan Jones and the Charlton fans, and then the Charlton squad as well, that have all sort of bought into his philosophy, his ideas, and he sent us with promotion, which I don't think that they would have thought of a better outcome, really, since appointing Nathan Jones. So, he's got some really good players all throughout the pitch, and they've done him some they've proven him well, really. He's a really good character to have, and I'm sure he will give the Championship a good go, unlike perhaps the last time Charlton were in the second division.
Yeah, and the key is it's worked, hasn't it? I mean, we'll come on to Leyton Orient in just a second, and then whip round back for Charlton for the final word in this mini review episode. But Nathan Jones, it's worked, hasn't it, with Charlton? Is that sort of the top and the bottom of it, because they brought him in and they've been vindicated, both him and Charlton as a whole, in terms of bringing him in and building the club in his image. That is something I think he makes a lot of, and the media do as well. But it is the way he runs things. If you buy into his project, you will get rewarded for the most part, with that blaring exception at Stoke, and obviously with Southampton as well. Didn't really get the time, admittedly. But it worked obviously at Luton, and it's worked here at Charlton in terms of, he always talks about sacrifice, and there was a good video inside the changing room, the post-match team talk, and that was something he talks about. He said really proud of his team, obviously, and to paraphrase, he was talking about, you've had to sacrifice, and that really is the key word. And I think one of the things they mentioned on the commentary of the game was that the players weren't allowed their phones on the day of the game. They went into Wembley the night before to have a walk around and get a sort of feel of the place before the game. And those little eccentricities, if you like, you can't go shopping or whatever it is that got the news earlier on in the season. But those little bits and pieces work, and they build this entire ethos and this entire sort of community around the whole thing, that everyone is in this together and they're all pulling their weight and pulling towards the same thing. And it's worked a treat. And they're into the Championship now. So we'll see how they get on in the Championship. They'll have some work to do, of course, in the summer. But that they were probably, I mean, obviously finished fourth in the end, but perhaps they were the third best team in the division. Obviously, they fell at that sort of final hurdle in terms of losing to Wrexham. But they've got there in the playoffs, and it was a pretty decent final as well. Leyton Orient, they did really well to get into the playoffs at all, and that story might get lost a little bit in all of this talk of the playoff final itself, because they were in the relegation zone. They were really down the bottom of the table in sort of October, November, and they've come out of nowhere to bound all the way up the table, and that end of season run was absolutely stellar, and it got themselves into the top six. And then obviously they beat Stockport to get to the final as well. It's been a really commendable job, and even if they have fallen at the last hurdle, they have done an absolutely stellar job and superbly Richie Wellens to get them to where they were.
Yeah, they can be very, very proud of themselves, really. In terms of the run they've had across the season. After the shaky start, I remember meeting you, Jim, and we did a podcast, and at that point there was a vacancy at Blackpool, and I was like, yeah, Richie Wellens will go there, because at that point, weren't doing very well, and he would have wanted to get out of the situation as soon as possible and jump ship, like perhaps some other managers might have done. But in fairness to him, he stuck to it. He stuck to the job. He managed to sort of turn the tide around and get some real positive results on board, get a real momentum building, and some surprise results along the way. None more so than in that semi-final. I think Stockport were absolute favourites going into that semi-final. No one batted an eyelid really in terms of Leyton Orient getting past Stockport, but they did it. Yes, on penalties, but they did it. They still got to the final, and just sort of bit cruelly beaten, I guess, in the final, in terms of only one goal. In terms of they had more attacking chances, just didn't finish them properly. And it was just one moment of quality in the final that did it for Leyton Orient. But nevertheless, they can be so proud in terms of how they've come in terms of the start of the season and the journey they've been on. And I think they've made a real case for themselves this season, Leyton Orient, to not just be a mid-table League One side that perhaps that they've been looked at previously. It's now the past 2 years. Last season they just finished outside the top six. This season they finished just inside the top six. So they are making progress, and it's I guess an exciting time to be a Leyton Orient fan with sort of the ownership as well. It's all looking very positive and very rosy at the minute, and it's about using that to go forward, and not using sort of the defeat at Wembley to be too bogged down about, really, and use it all a bit of a positive springboard going forward. But they could be very proud of themselves. Just ultimately, I guess, over the course of the season, beaten by the better side on the day, but they'll just be frustrated that they can't finish the chances in the final. But very, very proud, and they should be very, very excited for what's to come.
And how well have those 3 loanees done, obviously. That is the key for the summer, really. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about that as we go through. We've got a lot to talk about in the summer in terms of our transfer reviews and that sort of thing. And they've got a good job on their hands in terms of replacing those 3 of Leyton Orient. The final word then on Charlton before we do go. We'll have our full season review. The 2 of us, Sam and Callum, joining us as well. This week, just a couple of days' time, we'll have our full season review on podcasts and on YouTube. So stay tuned for that. But final word before we go, I'll give it to you, Seb, on Charlton. They've done what they wanted. They've got promoted, and they've done it in the best way possible through the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. The playoffs can be the worst thing as a fan, and they can be the best thing as a fan. And trust me, I've been at Wembley for both sides of this game. As I mentioned to Sam before the game, I've been there when we won Barnsley won in 2016, and when we lost in the last minute to Sheffield Wednesday in 2023. That was, and it's sort of. You get really elated, or you just get really down, and that's the joy of the playoffs. And Charlton have got through and seen the joy and seen the best edition of the playoffs. Really, it's a special way to go up. It's a special way to win, and yeah, they thoroughly deserve it. I guess over the course of the season, they've been a really solid side, a really solid manager. And yeah, wish them all the best in the Championship. It's a shame to lose them in League One, but yeah, wish them all the best going forward, because they're a good side and they've got some real momentum building at their club.
Fantastic. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks as well for Seb here on this bright and early on a Monday morning. As I say, we'll be back for our full season review, the full complement of the 4 of us later this week, before everything really gets going for the summer and attention turns to transfers and that sort of thing. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again later this week.